Thank you for being here today. I've felt called to speak to you about of having the warrior spirit, um, and kind of relaying it to you as best as I can from kind of like the Aikido martial art format. Um, Something that you were just speaking about earlier with resistance and the suffering that is out there. There are kind of three ways that you can approach a situation. Um, and one of the three ways martially is just stepping off the line. So if something is coming at you, you step off the line. And the second way would be to be able to kind of settle down, open up, and just kind of let it move through you. And the way I imagine that is if your system was kind of like a colander, has kind of the holes to be able to kind of let water drain through when you're getting things rinsed out. So let's say you're rinsing something out underneath the faucet, so the small little colander holes, it seems conducive to letting the water out. And you get your items cleaned that are inside the colander. But if you had a torrential water current kind of going through your colander, let's say a fire hydrant hose, those small holes on your colander really need to be able to open up in order to let all of that energy flow through. Otherwise, your whole structure will collapse. And it's painful and probably hurts, and there's probably suffering involved and so forth. But the idea and the concept is when you settle down, and the settling down is kind of, settling our system down, all the different thoughts and pieces that are kind of swarming all around, be able to settle those things down and be able to open up in a way like a colander if you're getting hit with a certain amount of energy. So that's the second way of being able to approach a situation. And the third way, actually, there is a fourth way, but the third way is engaging with the situation in the form of kind of a connection. So once there's a connection that's made, then kind of moving with it, dancing with it, if you will, and maybe something will come of it, some result. And the fourth way is actually a little bit combination of all three. Sometimes there is all of it happening at the same time. And so as practitioners, maybe we'll practice with one aspect at a time. And now to kind of bring up the subject of, what does that look like or feel like if we're doing all of it, and doing all of it well. I think of the Aikido seminar I was at a couple weeks ago, and one of the black belt teachers, very well known, studied with, I guess, Steven Seagal, and has kind of a history of, I guess sometimes being a jerk because he's had that upbringing and growth as he's developed, and obviously he's older, a little wiser, and he's trying to obviously let that go and let that be a different person. So he comes onto the mat, and at this point I forget his name. He calls another black belt up so that he can demonstrate what he wants to teach the class today for the next couple hours. And he finds a black belt, seems to be a random guy, because this black belt teacher is from out of town, and he came by himself. So some random black belt he calls up, and he begins to do these certain techniques with them. But every time he is about to throw this black belt, you can see the black belt kind of quiver and kind of go into the animalistic part in our brain, the fight or flight. And you see his system kind of collapse and kind of go into a flight, like, oh, should I be here? Um, and so much so that the teacher even commented on that. He's like, I'm not that big bad monster that everyone says that I am. It's okay. Don't have to freak out. And the black belt's like, oh, okay, okay. And it's interesting because in Aikido and in life in general, and the practice that we do, because we work with energies, there's a lot of seeing that can happen that's not just physical. There's a felt sense of seeing. There's a hearing sense of seeing. There's all these different ways of seeing that we can see with our system. And I imagine kind of in the martial arts format, when you are working with your partner and you have that fear sense of fight or flight come up, the other partner sees that. Not in the physical eyes, but they will feel it in a certain way. Maybe a muscle tenses, maybe something happens, maybe there's a withdrawal or something. And it's kind of like the Predator movie, the seeing isn't with physical eyes, but that becomes your heat signature. And then that's how they seek you out, kind of based on the fear of when you are wanting to contract and withdraw. Otherwise, the opposing, fear signature of like the fight, and then the muscles start tensing up and you start kind of bulging, ready to do something. Those are all, if you will, heat signatures that you're giving off. And in like the Predator movie, that's how things, predators, if you will be able to see you. And so it was interesting to watch how after a few of the demonstrations with the teacher and the black belt, we go and practice. And then it was time to do another demonstration. And the teacher looks around, and normally the black belts are kind of in the front row, ready to be called up to be used as demonstrators. And he couldn't find his guy. He's like, where did he go? And he literally sat himself behind another person hiding. He was hiding. And everyone turned around because they knew what he looked like. They saw him demonstrate. So they all looked back to see where he was. And he's like kind of cowering. And he's like, oh. And the teacher's like, no, I want you again up here. I want you to practice. I want you to work with that aspect of fear that is somehow coming up with this specific teacher. And I just thought it was brilliant because, how many times in our lives where whatever situation, whether it's driving or doing some kind of grocery, you have this, intent and really wanting to be a smooth, insertion and execution. You can leave and, not kind of get tangled up in anything. But that's absolutely not how life works. Absolutely. And, sometimes you go to the grocery stores and then some drama that gets played out, and then it happens to be right next to you. And the next thing you know, you're pulled into it. And the whole time you're like, wait, you had so much resistance towards it in the beginning because you wanted this very clean concept of going to the grocery store, getting your stuff and leaving, kind of like a warrior / invisible, I don't know what it is, what to call it, but that aspect that we may call and name it as a warrior is actually not so much this aversion or resistance to kind of interactions with human beings or others. It's really about being okay with embracing in an acceptance way, and being at peace with whatever it is that arises. So if you do need to kind of, whatever is coming at you, whatever the situation calls for, to not put out that heat signature that all of a sudden, you really don't want drama that day, and you're next thing you know, the lady that, has all those like prickly hooks around her, you're like, oh no. And then she's hooked on you and you're having conversation, you're like, and you go into your head in the story about that. Instead of doing that, maybe being like, oh, well, that's interesting. She's having a drama. Oh yeah, I see those hooks, and not having any kind of resistance, aversion, or heat signature. And then you notice that they just go off and go about their day, and maybe they go hook onto someone else, and you watch that, and you're like, okay, not Maybe sometimes you'll, in the beginning, go, "Whew, that was a close one." But eventually you get to a place where you're like, "Oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay." And be able to maneuver through your life and the world with a truer sense of a warrior spirit, because a warrior spirit isn't about being aggressive or fighting. I think the deeper level of that through your training is love and acceptance and having peace around that, and to be able to have that kind of feeling and love and vulnerability uh, is very scary for oneself to kind of discover. That vulnerability feels like you want to protect it and um, be really masculine around it or something. Yeah, I don't know. Questions, thoughts, comments?
I know what you said. We see it so, and so we recognize ourselves in that. Certainly, that's kind of going on. Okay, well, everyone's learned, but it's still a lot of work to accept sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It does take a lot of work.
Being alone.
Of course. Yes.
Guess not.
Yes, I feel our egos are always permutating, if you will, and sometimes it could be that, and sometimes it can be, just taking things personally, and that kind of gets your goat, if you will. I think of this last week when I had to go pick up a student from his classroom, new client, and I'd never met him before, a fourth grader. And I go into the classroom, teacher brings him over to me, um, and he looks up at me, and I'm like, "Hi, I'm Miss Way, and nice to meet you." I put my hand out, and he like scowled at me, put his hand behind his back as soon as I stuck the hand out, and he's like, "Who do you think you are? I'm not shaking your hand." And I was like, "Okay, dissed, got it. Okay, come on, let's go." Say that out loud? Yeah, I did. In my head, I said the diss part, but then on my outside, I was like, "Okay." Put my hand down, and I was like, "Okay, come on, let's go." Because I needed to go do an initial session with him to see if we were gonna do further counseling together. And at first, the initial taking it personally, the ego of like, "You don't like me? Why don't you like me? I haven't done anything to you," blah, 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 kind of thing. But then taking a step back and being just respectful of it in such a way, it's like, okay, that's where you want to be. I can totally be okay with that. And as we were walking out, I was like, "So did you want to know my name?" He's like, shrugged his shoulders, like, "Meh." I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Well, whenever you want to know my name, you can ask me." He's like, he heard me, just kept walking like he was in trouble. And I was like explaining to him who I was and, "Did you know why I'm pulling you out of classroom?" He's like, "Have no idea." I was like, "Well, your parents signed a permission form so that, I can see you for counseling, once a week." So we go into my little Harry Potter closet that I have. And I'm going through questions of getting to know him. And I'm like, "Hey, you're welcome to look over there because I, brought some toys and stuff like that, and see if anything interests you." So by the end of the session, he's like gone through my little fishing tackle box of all these things, really likes my little dragon statue, really thinks it's super cool. It's like, "Oh, these toys are so cool. I wish I could bring it back with me to the classroom and show all my friends." I'm like, "No, you can't do that. They stay here, but it'll be here the next time you come." And then had a set of finger puppets that he put on his fingers. I was like, "Do you need help with that?" It's like, "Yeah." And he's like completely in his world of dialoguing with these finger puppets. And I'm like, "Okay, well, it's time to go." And I'm like, "Well, did you want to see me again?" He's like, "Okay," and stuff like that. And I mean, just by the end, he just couldn't wait to come back to play with those toys in his mind. And before I dropped him off at the classroom, I was like, well, do you want to shake my hand now? He's like, puts out his hand and he shakes it like a typical fourth grader. And I just thought, what and how beautiful it is when we, instead of, pushing up against that of making others or things feel like they need to be a certain way, to really just accept how they are and just watch what they want to do and kind of maybe follow their lead, especially with children, I think. And I was just grateful that he was okay with me then. I think if it'd be really difficult if there was like just no friendship or connection, that would have been a struggle. So I felt like it was a blessing and grateful for that. But just always learning like how a little fourth grader can poke at our ego and be like, see what you're gonna do with that. It's like, okay. Yeah.
It's helpful to remember that even adults have that little fourth grader in them. Well, because if you frame it that way, all of a sudden it's not as threatening. It's just like, oh, you're just putting out your little fourth, fifth grade drama.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Bully on the, the playground.
Yeah.
Charge.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yes. Yes.
It's not about.
Not that mean?
It's not about.
Not right. Right.
It's about.
Yeah. 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 So life is beautiful that way, and all the lessons that they throw at us. And yeah, settle down and opening up all the time to whatever energies that you may be getting kind of hit with or kind of moving through you with. Really a good concept to practice. So let's meditate.